Welcome to Innovating Music, a podcast from the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the UCLA Center for Music Innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Gigi Johnson. The land of Filemaker Pro. I had a great conversation, which you guys get to enjoy, with Paul Bradley from Eventric, who shares his stories about starting out on the road and working in tour operations, and also as a drummer, working his way to taking files on the road on early Compaq computers, and everybody creating their own tool sets for touring concerts, and taking it all the way to how then they launched Eventric and what's happening in anything from predictive data, security, environmental management, and ways to kind of get into the touring business if you're a young person wanting to get started. So enjoy this conversation with Paul and see how this might parallel your experiences working with complex information in various experiences. So how many moving parts are involved in a tour? I'm assuming you've got all the staff involved, and you've got the kind of the where and the when stuff involved.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the easiest way we explain it to people outside our industry is that we, aren't providing any services for the fan. This is strictly for the crew and the team of the event or the band or the tour to organize all of the information, the production, all the logistics, the scheduling, the travel, all of the ticketing, the budgeting, and all the personnel management in one place. So it's traditionally something that tours have been using various Excel sheets or databases or online document applications, and you end up having a lot of redundancy, a lot of re-entry of a lot of this information and distributing it to different people in different ways. What Master Tour has primarily always been is a way to collect all of the pertinent information to execute a tour in one place, and then make it easy for people with various levels of access and permissions to get the information that they need.
So how in the world did you get into this? Are you this massively coordinated person who, when he was a child, used to alphabetize the canned goods in their mom's cupboard? Or are you the massively organized guy who said, this is the way that things should happen? Or how did you end up doing this?
Yeah, no, I was the opposite. And I think my parents would agree. I certainly wasn't organized. I probably wasn't the best student as far as that went throughout high school. But when I did go to college, and for nothing in music or technology, I started a promotion company just for out of interest of bringing bands that I wanted to see come to my town.
And so where was your town? Where did you start?
This was in Des Moines, Iowa.
Des Moines, the hotbed.
Hotbed of culture and technology.
Excellent.
But it actually was, because you had a lot of activity kind of in the bigger schools. So we would drive, distances to see bands, even up to Minneapolis. So started a small, independent outside of the school promotion company. And that just got me interested in kind of the mechanics of putting on a live event. So after I graduated college, moved back to Chicago and immediately got a job as an intern at an independent record label, and literally doing the get the coffee, clean the desk, drive the van, pick up the gear type of stuff. That lasted for about a year. And in between, I became, a little more responsible within the label. And it was also a management company, had a bunch of bands on it. So I was really getting interested in band management and then just kind of touring operations. Really had no intent of what that was going to bring me to do. What it ended up bringing me into was being the drummer of one of the bands, which was supposed to just be a fill-in for a few weeks until they found a proper drummer. That ended up being about 9 years of touring with this band, over 200 plus shows a year. So it was a complete career change. And throughout that, I think out of, as anyone knows, that when they're on the road that much of the year, it's pretty boring. We were touring at the trailer van, level. We didn't have a gigantic crew. We didn't have a tour bus. We were doing almost all of the work ourselves, loading our gear, settling the shows, finding the hotels, and most importantly, like finding things to do for the 18 hours a day that you're not really doing anything on stage. So during that time, I just started building in a very basic database, a way to collect our contracts, secure guest lists, things like travel, if there was any, or hotel rooms, and a venue database mostly. So every time we played a lot of these clubs repeatedly, I could go back and see what we did. And, so it was just this kind of process of adding to this database, for 4 or 5 years. It kind of became it wasn't even master tour at that point. It kind of just became a way that we conducted our business, from, generating contracts to tracking deposits to guest lists to hotels and venue data. And
so
then
when was this?
This was in the mid 90s.
So this is Microsoft Access, maybe, or
this is Filemaker. This was
Filemaker.
Yes, this might have even been Claris Filemaker.
Oh wow! So you were carrying. So you had a desktop computer that was having to get plugged in. This probably wasn't even a laptop time.
No, this was a PC Compaq. I can't remember the model. It was white. It probably had a 12-inch screen. It probably was
floppy
15
drives.
pounds, floppy drives. Yeah, certainly. No. Yeah, the first one, no disk drive. Gigantic, heavy, but that would power us on the road. So we were. I remember showing up sometimes with a laptop, to a small club in Fargo, and it'd be quite impressive that we had this type of technology power with us on the road.
For younger folk listening, they're probably going, "What are they talking about?" And older.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had one of those.
Yeah.
This band
that we used to tour with really went up to us one time because they showed up with a GPS unit that connected. I can't remember how, into the laptop, and then they could actually, this was way before even GPS was in cars. So I was just blown away at this technology. I mean, I was enraged with jealousy that they could, have this very primitive GPS tracking of their tour routing.
Cool.
But so anyway, towards the end of the 90s, we teamed up with a bunch of crew that had originally been with the Smashing Pumpkins. And one of the fellas, he and I hit it off kind of in a tech nerd way, where he had a database that he developed for Smashing Pumpkins in a similar type of capacity. So we just started kind of combining these things in various ways. Pretty quickly, he was hired by the Dave Matthews Band to be their monitor engineer. He brought that software to Dave Matthews Band, and that's kind of what really kick-started Master Tour becoming more than just a small system for a small band in a trailer and van driving around the country. For a few years, the Dave Matthews Band really stood behind it and kind of influenced a lot of the direction of the original version of Master Tour, just adding features. And this was, they were playing stadiums and sheds at this point, so it really kind of morphed into a solution that could handle a lot more things at the time. And really, at that point, still, I was just excited to be getting off the road, work more on technology, and helping Dave Matthews and their crew out with this system and various other things that we were experimenting, with the band. But it wasn't until years later, probably in the early 2000s, where we started to get a lot of interest from other bands, just out of association with Dave. It was the Neil Young Camp and Beastie Boys and Foo Fighters and Third Eye Blind and all these bands that we became friendly with, and they would just ask, "Hey, what is that you guys use?" There was nothing like it, and we were just giving it away, just installing it on their laptops and showing them how to use it. And then I think, most constructively listening to what they needed and how they operated slightly different on the road than a Dave Matthews Band. So for another 5 years, again, without any big intent of this becoming a business, we just kept ingesting these ideas from all these other tour managers and production managers and managers, and doing as best we could to build it into that current version of Master Tour.
So when did you decide this then was a company, and when did you stop being on tour?
So pretty much 2001, I stopped touring. The band wasn't playing as many shows. So it was became a thing from 200 shows to 100 shows to 50 to 10 to 5. So probably, early 2000s is when I completely stopped touring as a musician. And that's when the focus became more just on technology and software and building things for the touring industry. And then it wasn't until really, I remember the guy, Joe Linane, one of the greatest, production managers in our industry, that he was out with Luther Vandross, and I had just been on this worldwide tour of giving the software away to anyone that would take it. And he finally said, "How much is it?" And I had to, spot on, think up a price that seemed fair. He paid it, and I took the check home, and I'm like, first I have to create a bank account to be able to deposit this into.
And a DBA and a few other things.
Yeah, right. But it was kind of the first time I'm like, wow, people actually pay for this. Like it's proving out to be a pretty nice system that's running some pretty significant tours. And it was still in FileMaker. So as we ended up with 30 or 40 different bands, tours on it, and it started crashing miserably. It started just imploding, and it was a very difficult thing to maintain all these different systems, because it was still just it wasn't browser based. It was just an application built in FileMaker. So if you had corrupt files, if you had these issues that would happen, it would just literally, we would be FedExing CD-ROMs to people to reinstall the application through this painstakingly process to not overwrite data. And so it started really collapsing. We were getting a ton of interest, but it wasn't scaling well. So right around 2006, 2007, I kind of decided, hey, if this is going to be a real business, and if we can really get into this space and innovate, we're going to need some money. So pulled together a small 7-page business plan, went to friends of friends and family of family, and tried to pull together some money. Got a quick seed round together that allowed me to hire some legitimate programmers. And that seed round quickly turned into a Series A that, again, this now is 2008, 2009, not the best year
terrible
to
year.
to raise money. So it took about 3 or 4 years to complete our raise, but kind of looking back, that I think was the most constructive way we could have got an investment. Because I think if this was the heyday and we had millions of dollars thrown at us for a pretty, underserved market, and for a industry that, we were, pretty much creating kind of these tools, and there were any comparables. We weren't trying to do something that had been done just a lot better. We were going in and saying, hey, this seems like we can do this in a lot better way and provide this to people. So, having this rolling raise, having this kind of extended process where we're really bootstrapping and really having to, prove things in the market before we just launched this massive application, definitely in the long run helped us out.
And yet, trying to probably live more than one system at a time. I've worked with several companies over time that are part of a aging database framework.
Right.
And are needing to essentially not just move from one house to another, but to be really redoing the entire underbelly of the company while the company is in motion. Was that part of some of the challenges at the time?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we were not only constructing, the company, operationally, and getting all of the things in line, especially raising money. We needed certain elements in the company that just didn't exist, a board and, a team. I hired a CEO that had experience in software. And, so yeah, it was, we were doing 3 things at once: completely re-architecting our platform and then a whole new, back end. We were discovering what the market would be. We were, outreaching and just saying, how big is this market? Who will actually buy this at what price point? We're building the infrastructure of a company. We had about 10 people at the time, and just dealing with all of the governance of your normal corporate structure, and trying to raise money in 2008, when the market is collapsing and nobody is investing. So it was a pretty intense, 5 years of trying to put all that stuff together. And again, just kind of day by day bootstrapping from, being able to afford things and hire, but also, every bit of the technology and the functionality that we were putting out there, was really studied. We weren't taking a lot of guesses. And I think, again, if we had kind of this influx of capital, we probably would have rushed to market certain things that just weren't needed. And in the long run, it wouldn't have kind of built the credibility that we have for the tools that we provide now.
So let's talk more broadly about the touring industry and business and during that time. So was it changing during that time to need the additional complexity support? And has that continued to change now?
I think it has. We, again, didn't, we, for the most part, created this service for the touring industry. And it came out of my need for my band. It came out of my original partner's need for his band. And then it was a fairly sophisticated industry to a certain extent. There's incredibly smart people running the touring industry on the road, but it's a little antiquated on technology. I mean, you'll get the most innovative, cutting edge things for sound and for lighting and for, audio mixing and recording, tons of innovation there. But at the end of the day, back then you'd still have these crews of 200 plus people playing in arenas, with 18,000 people coming to see the show, and a show of which none of that existed in the facility that morning. Everything is brought to these locations every single day. Everything you see on the stage, everything backstage, from the catering to the operational offices, to just, all of the things that are needed to organize that event that night, start in the morning and are loaded out at the end of the night. So it's an incredibly complex series of operations that really has to move from one place to another every single day for the most part. So that was kind of what we realized, and it was somewhat antiquated on the tools that they were using. Everything was still just in Excel or in 3-ring binders and printed out, so.
Well, and in people's memories too, right? So that you have people who are massively embedded experts that have such art in their heads of what this is, that you had tools connecting experts.
And that's still to this day, and I don't know how that differs from other industries. There was, without a doubt, the top 20 production managers and tour managers that we work with, even more than the top 20. I mean, there is just this experience that they've had from 10, 20, 30 years of touring that no amount of data analytics, or predictive tools could help them conclude or come up with that decision for that day. I mean, it's dealing with the artists and their temperament. It's dealing with promoters and production, venue production people and crew and union.
And the quirks of a venue, and to know to look for the quirks of a venue.
And what to ask for, what not to ask for. There's all these things that really, at the end of the day, point to the artist to be able to put on a good show. And it sounds, a little bit high maintenance. All of these things that our users do, the tour manager and the catering and the production manager, they're managing, thousands of these little micro activities so that it's a successful show, so that the monitor wedge doesn't go out for the guitar player in the middle of the set, so that there is like a healthy, snack in between lunch and show, and all these little things, fresh towels, that the bus isn't 10 miles from the stage. And if there is, there's a golf cart ready. So it's weird that all these little things, and if they happen perfectly, and that most of these people in the industry do and execute amazingly, the artist can think about putting on a good show. They don't have to think about their health. They don't have to think about why they're so miserable because they haven't been home in a year and a half. It's creating this environment that can be as comfortable as possible so that the artists can do what they're supposed to do, which is put on a good show, stay healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy. And that type of, kind of just organization, I think, leads to more shows. It leads to the artists wanting to be on the road more, being happier on the road, putting on a better show that translates to the fans. And it translates back to the crew. There's plenty of stories of bands that are nightmares to work with, and plenty of stories of bands that have nothing and are some of the nicest, most professional people in the world. There's a amazing quote by Henry Rollins that I can't do verbatim, but he basically posted this on some stage at some point and basically said, hey, take care of your crew. They're the first ones there. They're the last ones to leave. Check your ego at the door and be respectful to everybody, that is helping you put on the show. And that really says a lot, to putting on kind of a good environment and creating a good culture for the road. Because I've never toured extensively, but imagine just being at a normal job, but then taking everybody in your job, sticking them on a bus and traveling around the country and not having really great, hotels or showers or food for 6 months. That's an element that is so unique to our industry that adds to the complexity of, just putting on a good show and staying happy while you're doing it.
So it's you guys have developed something that allows sort of a best of mechanism for, I tend to think of it as time travel, that needing to be able to see time and place in motion with information being captured. When I have not worked with tours, but when I work with event management, I tend to comment that the best event managers can almost see hours into the future and see that something's coming up the road that they will need to take action now so that it's not a problem in 2 hours, and you kind of are providing a way to visualize that.
And that's a perfect analogy, because it is a good tour manager can anticipate problems with checking in at an airport, and that's a nightmare. You bring 20 people to check in on a flight and something wasn't confirmed, or, they didn't anticipate the traffic, or they didn't anticipate, the delay in flight. And now they're at the airport for 8 hours instead of staying at the hotel. Those are exactly these little predictive things that when you have that experience, you just know. And what we provide with Master Tour mostly is just organizational tools, so that all of that stuff can be in one place and it can be distributed in a consistent way. I think one of the nicest things that we see now are, we have over 170,000 mobile users. So a good chunk of the touring world, the crew are on our mobile device, and that's where they go to find out what they're supposed to do for that tour, that week, that day. So, for the most part, it becomes this really consistent spot for them to go to, no matter how many tours that they're on. They're not creating a new Dropbox link. They're not, subscribing to an iCal subscription. It's always in their Master Tour mobile app. They always know exactly where to go for the hotels, where to go to put in a guest list request, where to go for a tour directory, and then where they can see, the past 5-10 years of their touring is now kind of accessible on their phone. So it's, it's really normalizing a lot of this information, cutting down on the redundancy, so that a tour manager or production manager can really do the important things. Back to your point of predicting a incredibly, horrendous day at the airport, so that they can, provide kind of a better day, and not having to kind of just regenerate all this information, over and over again.
So with so much information now being available, are there predictive models in what you're doing, or is that an opportunity in the future to do more predictive analytics?
Yeah, that's definitely an opportunity we have. I mean, most of and we're now entering our third version of Master Tour 3.0, which was just released this week. It's been in beta for about 4 months, and the full version is out this week.
And we're in May 2019 for those who are listening and going.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So where's this going from here? Where do you see touring changing? I mean, we've seen streaming come in as a major force on the recorded music side, and all the data coming from that. We see a lot bigger tours, a lot of interesting things happening on the festival side. What does this do for the art and technology of touring?
Well, one thing that's been interesting being in this business, since the 90s is, I've witnessed it going from a complete industry of recorded music to fund the touring. Touring was just a loss leader used to generate more album sales. Then when Napster and then streaming came along, it kind of flipped. Now artists, bands are going out to tour as much as they can to promote the streaming, because typically they're not making as much money as they had been, by selling CDs and cassettes. And now actually, another 5 years since streaming really came into force, we're actually seeing the label become more engaged, and the artists, not completely, I think, fairly, but starting to get paid justly for their streaming activity. So the nice thing for us, being a technology company in the touring industry, is that everybody's touring, and they're touring a lot longer. Typically it was just a summer season, maybe a little bit in the fall and spring, but now you really see bands go out and tour as much as they can. and that generates a lot of revenue, for everybody involved. So that is really helping us grow as a business, providing these touring tools. And Master Tour has always been a system that has just been helping them organize information once the event has been booked. We've also represented ourselves as kind of a post-contract type of utility. It's never been used to say, hey, I'm a band and I think I should go tour, across the Midwest. Where should I go and play? And we're never, I don't know if there's ever going to be enough data analytics, or predictive technology to perfectly execute a tour for a band based on their genre and kind of the patterns and, where they're going to do the best in what markets. So what we are excited for the future of the company is, we've by far have the most touring data, of any service out there. We have the most venue information. We've got the industry's largest venue database. So if someone is looking to play at a venue, they can go through our venue database, pull up a capacity, a venue type, for example, could be, they want to say, hey, we want to play somewhere within the, Chicago market in a 4,000 seater. That's all ages, that's indoor. So we're starting to provide these tools that aren't predictive, but are a little more analytical on doing searches for things that aren't available in this industry on a data wise yet, just into that, getting that specific kind of into the facility and the production requirements of these venues. So that's an exciting part of where we want to go with this now that we've got a good critical mass of users on the system. The other big thing that we're starting to do is form partnerships with, and this is the new platform is allowing us to do this finally, but forming partnerships with some of the big booking agencies and record labels, travel agents, so that all of, again, this data just doesn't have to be redundantly entered in 4 or 5 different systems. So we kind of envision this universal system that when the shows are confirmed from the agency side, it populates in Master Tour. Then the travel agencies that work with the entertainment industry can see certain bits of information and funnel the travel confirmation info into that tour. And then the label can go in and kind of manage the things that they're doing on the publicity side and the marketing side. The venues can go in and update their information. So during this advance process, which is an extensive period of time where you have to kind of communicate with the venue and the promoters to tell them, hey, this is exactly what we have. What exactly do you have as far as equipment? Centralizing that online can be an incredibly efficient tool, for all sides involved in the advance process. So that's kind of another big step we're taking with this release this year.
And I'm assuming security is of gigantic importance.
Very much so. Yeah, we've spent a lot of time with just being compliant and really protecting the data, because we are, starting to track a lot of sensitive information, a lot of financial information, a lot of personnel information and travel preferences. So yes, that is of the utmost importance to us. On the security side, surprisingly, it's not the first question everybody asks, but it's good for us to have that backup when they do.
Well, I think people are so used to thinking about email and text messages and all these loose threads of information about themselves, and don't tend to think, if I'm emailing someone with this information, that first of all, Lord knows where it goes.
Sure.
And second of all, that it's pass alongable. And so, it becomes an open doorway. We do a lot of political arguing about what's on what servers, but an email is
right.
Email has feet.
It's funny because a lot of people that we, first discuss security with, we'll see what they've been using previously, or in parallel, and it's email. They're sending unencrypted documents and attachments in email, but all of a sudden they are considering using more, of an online database driven tool, and then security becomes an issue without even realizing what they've been doing with email, for years and years before that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting is it gets to be security more of an attention issue for production. People do not want an EP or album released ahead of its time or in parts and pieces. Yep. But Memal had been passing parts of pieces of that around. So it's where you are and what you're doing. I remember when Foursquare was starting out earlier,
right?
A bunch of talent were posting where they were on Foursquare. And it's like, did you really want everyone to know where you are? Right. And here with your information, you're knowing where people are going to be some months in advance. And right. Information that is somewhat crucial to people's economic well-being, but security as well. So.
Yeah, it is. And there's always been that. We've always, had, artists enter in where they're staying, for hotels and the flights that they're on. And obviously you're going to, the fans that are really intent on
they'll figure
finding
it
out.
Anyway.
I mean, whenever we're on the road with larger A-list artists, you end up at their hotel and there's, a couple dozen fans outside of the hotel that just somehow, figured out where they're staying. And mostly it's because that's where the artist always stays, mostly because there are only so many 5-star hotels in most markets. So it's not, it's not that difficult to find out. It's, but still, we certainly are not going to be the company that, divulges this information. And we don't want any weak links in our system where, anything could be found out. I mean, even, we don't want even basic tour routing, even though that's available on 24 different sites on where the band is playing. But our information goes a lot deeper than that, and so we have to take these extra measures in security.
So, other than things like security, what issues do you see coming in the future?
I think it's one thing that we're seeing a lot of is just the environmental impact of touring, and we're seeing a lot more of the artists we work with, kind of take responsibility for that. It's kind of been, a thing in the past where certain people preach, about doing things that are better for the environment, but at the same time, they're running a 30 truck tour and taking private jets and, doing all these things that leave a big, footprint behind when they leave. So that's a big thing. There's artists like Jack Johnson and Dave Matthews that are just really ahead and leading kind of the fight on that to be responsible touring. Even from, developing campaigns to pick up your trash at a festival and not bringing plastic containers. And, there's a lot of great companies, especially on the festival level, that are doing things that are just, a lot more environmentally friendly on site, on what type of things that they provide, from bottled water replacements, to, really delivering a good message on that. So I think that's going to be a big part of that, kind of leaving less of a footprint, of what touring does to the environment. And I think there's going to be a lot more, it's interesting, just can't really say how the touring industry has grown, throughout the last 15 years, pretty significantly year over year. And there's some great companies behind that, that are making kind of the experience for the fans a lot more interesting. It's not always just, hey, here's 4 people on the stage playing music, show up for 90 minutes and then leave. It's becoming a lot more immersive type of experience, especially in these festivals like Coachella, where, it's more about that experience than necessarily the band that is playing. So I think that's going to be, without it going to straight holograms, I think that's going to be,
and it already has gone to straight.
And it has, right.
But, yeah.
But I think the live event is just going to continue to evolve. And I think, fortunately, for a lot of reasons, just selfishly for me, is what I'd like to experience live. I mean, there was a push, a while ago where we thought streaming live shows, in your home was going to replace a lot of the concert event. Why go out and spend $150 on a ticket when you can stream it at home? I don't think we're ever going to replace that live experience and kind of the community experience that you enjoy when you go to a live event, whether that's a concert or a festival or a sporting event. So I don't think that's ever going to be replaced in a home environment. I think that's always going to point, to a healthy live culture and live events. So making those more interesting to justify some of the price points that a lot of bands, I remember, I think it was the Eagles, and I don't know when in the 90s, that broke that $100 per ticket price point. And it was a big kind of discussion within the industry, like, where are we going? Are we pricing out the consumer by these high ticket prices? And now you can almost not find a concert unless you go to a club in your city that's under $75, $50. So I think a big part of the success for that is just the content. And that's just a good live experience. And that can be a DJ, that can be any genre of music, but it's not just about, I think playing music on a stage necessarily anymore. But it's also not, about everything, but that's always going to be the anchor point, I think, on why a live event is successful, of, seeing an artist that you like on stage, creating these other experiences throughout that, before, during, and after, I think will be a big part for the kind of continued growth of the live event industry.
And then, also increasingly global, yes?
Increasingly global?
Yep.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, that's, I've seen personally just a lot more bands that can come over to the States and play, and the other way around. A lot of bands that now can go kind of around the world and play. And I think that's a great thing that streaming has done. It's exposed these spots in the world where, bands can be gigantic in these little regions and go out there and justify, having that one show that could fund an entire 2 weeks so that they can go play around in the area where they might not have as much activity. That without a doubt is a huge help. It's still really expensive to travel internationally. There are, ways to do that, not bringing your backline, not bringing, your gigantic 18-piece drum set, sharing, tours and equipment and production. I mean, just flying overseas is, I don't know how anybody does that financially in the first place, with the price of basic economy tickets to London, for example.
Yep.
But it's certainly a great way to kind of expand your touch, and the the live event in Europe is incredible. I mean, mostly it's kind of more of a festival environment there. There's way more festivals in Europe than there are in the States, and I think that's leveling a little bit. Where it's not so saturated. That's all you see. But that's definitely gotten people out, to experience all these different types of music and bands, and that translates, into a healthy industry.
And I'm assuming that's provided a lot more international opportunities for your company.
Yeah, the biggest thing we've seen, about 25% of our business now is international. And it's not exactly easy to define international, because it could mean that the touring team, is based out of Berlin, but they're touring an American band, in Sweden, or there's a Swedish band that comes to the States, but it's all American management, label, agency, and touring team. So it's not always where you see a Swedish band come over using our software and it's, operated by a Swedish team. So we generally just go by where that band is based out of, and it's about 25% that's international outside of North America. And the other nice part of our growth too has just been outside of music, and we have about 20% of our business is just non-musical entities. It could be like a motocross, it could be a BMX race, Cirque du Soleil, or different types of circuses use it. The Harlem Globetrotters use it. I mean, we've had all these different types of traveling events use the software. And that's really exciting, because when you think about the way the Harlem Globetrotters tour, or the Red Bull Air Show, it's pretty much the exact same as a tour. There's different levels of production. At the end of the day, there's a team of people kind of moving this operation from one market to another in a incredibly short amount of time. That takes a lot of production and logistics, but it's not too different from touring a band around. It's just at the end of the day, you have an air show or a basketball game instead of, 90 minutes of a rock band. But a lot of that is incredible. I'd say 90% of it is almost identical. The catering, the lodging needs, the travel, the logistics, the trucking, everything. Sometimes even the venue is the exact same. It's just it's a circus instead of a rock show.
Or they're all circuses in their own way.
They are, yes. They're all traveling circuses.
So, Paul, you're now not touring. You now are living out of Chicago, and
yes.
you now have this interesting growing company. As we wrap up this conversation, anything that you'd like to mention before we finish up?
I'm very happy I'm not touring. That's it was wonderful when I did it. I wouldn't change that experience, and I have nothing but incredible respect for the people that I know that do tour. It's an incredibly mentally and physically taxing thing to do outside of just being good at your job. The sleep deprivation, the nutrition deprivation is really difficult to deal with. So happy I'm not touring. I'm really happy it got me into this world. I love being in this space. I love the people in our industry. And it is an incredibly innovative time, both kind of with the music coming out and the accessibility to that music, but also, the things that we're seeing in the live event and the technology on the stage and behind the stage. It's amazing. It's super exciting. And I, couldn't think of a better industry to be in right now.
So I have a closing question that I wouldn't normally ask, but I got an email the past couple of days from a high school junior who asked me, and I wrote her back to find out why in the world she was asking me this, but she asked me this question. She wanted to become a tour manager. And so she was trying to figure out what she needed to do. And she was trying to figure out if she needed a college degree and what type of college degree to become a tour manager. And as I tend to tell young folks, I sound like an old person saying this, go
to school. Right.
Well, no, actually, I don't say that as much.
No, you don't. Okay.
Go do what you want to be doing.
Go do.
Yeah,
right.
Go do it. You can then get a college degree or figure what might work on it, but a college degree doesn't necessarily lead to what you're wanting to do. And it's definitely not a turnkey option. You work with and talk with a lot of tour managers. What would you tell this young, wonderful high school junior about in the modern day of tour management, how someone would get started?
To your point, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the touring industry, very few, if any, went to college to become that, mostly because it was never offered. Now there are some great schools like Belmont University, SAE Institute, and a couple others that provide actual touring courses within the curriculum and music management and production technique. We provide our software to a bunch of these universities just to use as part of the, as part of the class. But you are definitely not going to get a touring position just because you went to one of these colleges. And it's exactly that. I mean, I think, probably every tour manager that you meet will tell you of a story of how he had a bunch of buddies and she, without a doubt, that started touring with, this group, and just for weekends. And then that all of a sudden the band got bigger, and next thing you know, she's touring around the world, with her friends. And we've got awesome examples and actually stories on our blog about a lot of these people and how they got started. So it's definitely just get out there and do it and see if you like it, because it does seem glamorous to be on the road, with a band and touring and seeing the world. But the realities of it is you don't really see the world. A lot of times you're in the basement or, the backstage of a place in the middle, of a suburb, and you're working 20 hours a day. So it's draining, but I would say most of the people that do it absolutely love it and can't imagine anything else. I think just if you have this desire to travel and see things differently in the world, it's a great profession to do it. And I wouldn't say that going to any of these colleges and getting a degree would guarantee you anything. But a college degree certainly helps, when you're vying for position, with 5 other people, going for that same thing. So it's just finding someone that, whether working at a club. I mean, there's so many people that used to be sound engineers, at a club first, or a runner, for a promoter like Live Nation at a venue. These are all experiences that get you kind of in the trenches of the live event in the touring world. And if you're good, you get picked up right away. I mean, we know so many people that were runners or, worked as an assistant for a catering company, and these tours just identify them right away. And they know, if these people not only are good, if they hustle, but also if they can live, you're literally living with these people on the road. So that's a big quality that you have to be successful, is just being a good person, trusting, hardworking.
And someone wants to spend an 18-hour travel day with.
Right. In a small bus with 18 other people. I mean, I think that's the, that's the biggest test. It is very glamorous. I mean, the ability to go to places that you would never do with a normal job is a huge plus. But there are challenges both physically and mentally that you have to get over. And we work with a lot of people that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, and it's just they can't imagine anything else. And usually they're the best ones at it.
Well, thank you for joining me, Paul. You have the blog that is on your Eventric webpage. Any other way that you'd suggest folks to get a hold of you who are intrigued by this as a company and technology?
Yeah, I mean, just all of our information is on our website to contact us. We love to talk to people. Obviously, if they're interested in our products, if they're just interested in the music touring industry, anyone that is interested in getting into the touring industry, if they're serious, we would love to help them out. We have plenty of people that we can point them to and just talk to them, about it. We'd be totally open to that. So yeah, go to the website, go to our blog. Would love to talk to anybody about any of this.
Cool. Well, that wraps up this podcast. Many thanks to the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the UCLA Center for Music Innovation for being our hosts of this ongoing series. You can subscribe to us in all the usual places, or you can come find us at innovation.schoolofmusic.ucla.edu. Join us again to follow the other adventures that we will be tracking down in innovating music. Thanks again.